Thanks, Ranjit. My name's Leanne. As Ranjit says, I'm one of the other KQuIP program managers. So I work to build QI capability, confidence and leadership in the Northwest and Yorkshire and Humber. So I'm going to be supporting the Bradford team as one of the pilot sites moving forward in this project. So what I'm going to do for the next sort of 10 minutes or so, I'll try and do a whistle stop tour of going through the QI tool stakeholder mapping and analysis. And you've heard sort of stakeholders being mentioned in Rosie and Catherine's presentation. So I'll go through what that actually means. You'll become very familiar with our KQuIP methodology. It's based on the IHI model for improvement that Rosie talked about before. So you'll become really familiar with this, but I'm going to talk through step 2, which is involve and assemble your team. And in that step is also thinking about your project stakeholders. QI is all about the people. We're going to go through all these tools and methods and concepts. That's just a small part of the iceberg. The big part is all about the people. So people, you will know straight away who your cheerleaders are. So people who will really, really support you in this project. But you also, I'm sure right now, thinking about the people who are maybe challenging or a bit resistant to your project, and that's okay. We need both. We need both of them. We need the shakers and the movers, and those people who are resistant. If we can win over the people who are a bit challenging and resisting a project, then think about what you could achieve with your cheerleaders. So it's really, really important that we focus about the people. We need to co-produce and we need to collaborate in quality improvement. So it's all about the people. This is my team, and we're all here today. So you've heard from Julie. Here's Julie. That's me. Georgie's been sitting in the background. We've all met Ranjit. Catherine, we've just heard about, and Kay, and we're actually missing Sarah off this photograph. So my team is very, very small. We've all got different experiences, we've got different skill sets and strengths and weaknesses, but that's what makes us a really effective team. We're all different. We've all got different backgrounds, and it's a small team, so there's 7 of us, and that's what makes us really, really effective. And I know Ranjit and Rosie have been doing some work with you about getting your project team. And they're the people that will make sure that this project is successful. So we know what a project team is. Now we're going to focus on stakeholders. And a stakeholder is someone who can influence, who either in a negative or a positive way, and someone who will feel the impact of the changes in your project. Involving key groups and understanding and acting on their perspectives help you to ensure that the changes that you make are sustainable, they're embedded into practice, we don't move back to the default, and they will produce the best outcome for your patients, for those living with kidney disease. So this is the QI tool that we're going to use, and Ranjit and the various programme managers, when we come round to do the face-to-face workshops, we'll do this with you. So this just kind of gives you an oversight and maybe start thinking about how you engage your stakeholders. So it's really, really important that you do this at the very first stage of your project. You want to identify those who need to be involved, but you have to revisit the tool as well. So it's not just a one-off. You have to constantly look and review it. So there's 4 steps, and I'm going to look at each one of them sort of individually in a bit more detail. So we have to identify who those are, and we start with those directly involved or affected, like I've said, those who have maybe done similar projects before, any experts in the areas. So you should always include someone a bit more senior in those early discussions. There's different ways that you can identify a wider stakeholder group. So you can have informal conversations in your core team. or you can do it more formally through group discussions, listening events, especially if your project sort of covers multiple departments. You can have workshops, and you can sort of identify who those people are. I think it's really, really important that you just list everybody possible, and then you can, and then we'll talk about how we reduce that list down. But think of anybody who would have influence and anybody who would be impacted. It's absolutely amazing that we have people with kidney disease here on our training today. Please think about those people who are living with kidney disease as stakeholders, as member of your project team. They bring so much. They'll give you a different viewpoint. They create a service that's more aligned to what patients need. And we're getting it straight from the horse's mouth without being too rude there. And they can actually influence other healthcare professionals who are resistant to change. Really, really powerful drivers. This is a word cloud that we asked a patient in the Northwest, you know, what does it mean to you to be a stakeholder? And what he said was, he says, actually being a patient is really, really low in my priority list. He's a home dialysis patient. He has nocturnal home dialysis, and he does that at night. But in the daytime, he does so much more. He does other stuff. He's got various skill set that he uses, and he's a big driver for change in the Northwest when it comes to home dialysis. So it's thinking not just as, you know, our patients are experts by experience, they're experts in other stuff. And we should harness those skills as well. So just to think about that a bit more. Another really helpful tool, we call it the 9 Cs, and it just helps you to have a bit more of a broad range of possible stakeholders. So once you come up with that initial big long list, you know, refer to this 9 Cs and see if there's anybody else that's potentially missing. So that's identifying our stakeholders. So the next step is organising and prioritising your list. So if you've got a big long list of people that you need to engage and communicate with, you know what, that can be really overwhelming. And it could feel like a full-time job. And actually, when am I going to get time to do the actual work? So we have to start by assessing the stakeholders' influence and impact on the project. So you can see along here is less impact, more impact. So along the bottom is the impact, and along the side there is the power, that influence in the project. And by asking those questions in these quadrants helps us, when we've got our sticky notes, when we've got those lists, to apply to put the names into these quadrants. So have they got more power and more impact? We really need to engage them, and we really need to involve them in the project in that green box. But actually, if they've got less power and less impact in the project, you know, maybe we can just monitor this little group. So it really helps to sort of narrow that big long list down into your prioritising your communication. So then we move on to step 3, and that's understanding your stakeholder. So once you've identified and you've moved them into that matrix, you know, are they on your side? Can you work with them? Will they commit to your project? Are they reliable? Are they neutral? Are you against? How might you bring them on board to your project? How can I tap into their skill? What's in it for them to help me with this project? Are there key issues that I need to address before they fully engage? So it's really, really helpful to understand who they are, what they fear, what skills they have, and what it is that they want out of this, because that then helps you how you're going to communicate and how often you communicate with them. So just have a little think. As humans, and Rosie's already touched on this before, we're creatures of habit and we don't like change. I'll put my hand up and I'll say, I don't like change. But just have a little think about why do we oppose change? And Rosie might already have given us some of those answers. It's the human factors. It's the fear of something new. It's the fear that of the unknown. We're pushed out of our comfort zone. Somebody's asking me to do something different, so you know I'm quite scared. And when we're scared, we have these negative emotions. So that's why we really, really need to understand our stakeholders to avoid this from happening. So now that we've identified our stakeholders, we've prioritised how we're going to communicate with them, and we've understood them a little bit more, we're now going to engage with our stakeholders. So again, it's coming back to that human factors. If we don't communicate and engage our people, people aren't going to be ready for the change. They'll have those strong emotions such as fear and anger. People become defensive. They start to have that skepticism. People don't know what they're doing. And then we have that conflict and that resistance, and we want to avoid that at all costs. If you engage with your stakeholders at this early stage, it makes the journey easier at the end. So how can we do that? Okay, well, we can have a project launch. So once you know what it is that you're going to do, you can have a project launch in your department, various other ways that you can have that, but have a project launch and tell everybody in your department, this is what we're going to do. You can have a project drop-in time or an open door. Some units that I've worked with have allocated an hour a month for the project, for people to come and ask them questions, and they find that that's really, really helpful. So it's that open door policy that we like to talk about in leadership. And there might be people in your stakeholders that might want to get involved. Give them a role, give them a task. And again, for those who are a bit resistant, ask them to do something, to get involved, and that might help with that conflict. And I love this word, infiltrate. Infiltrate the informal networks. Most departments have got WhatsApp groups, or they use closed social media groups. Infiltrate those informal networks by giving updates. That is really, really key, is those informal networks. We've got formal networks, or we've got formal meetings that we attend and you can give updates, but the informal ones are the ones that sometimes get left behind. You're constantly reviewing with any QI tool. You're stepping back and you're looking at the big picture. So review which are new stakeholders and how you need to engage them. So you're constantly looking at your stakeholder analysis. So in summary, it's all about the people. Getting the right people involved will either make or break your project. To understand your people, use the 4 steps. And just start thinking who's positive and who's going to have that negative influence, and who's going to have who will feel the impact of your project, and Ranjit and the programme managers will help sort of solidify this when we come out in February. And that's it from me. Thank you.